Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. My name is Lorna Titley. We at Keynote Communications are delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar. Our panel today will be looking at sustainable yacht design. This is an interactive session. So if you would like to pose a question to our panel in person, then please type the word live in capital letters after your question. We will then try and move you onto the screen so you can actually ask your question live. And then once you've finished, we'll put you back in the audience again. If you could remember to put all your questions, please, in the Q&A box and not in the chat facility, and then we're more likely to see them. So thank you for that. I would now like to introduce you to Diane Burn of megayachtnews.com, who is moderating today's session. Full biographies for Diane and all the panel can be seen on our website at www.keynote.com. Thank you very much, and I'll now hand over to you, Diane. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you today. I am delighted to be joined by four professionals who don't just, as the saying goes, talk the talk, they walk the walk when it comes to sustainability. As Lorna said, their full bios are on the website, but I'll have each one of our speakers give you a brief overview of their background, particularly when it comes to this topic we are going to be discussing today. So our panelists are Aino Grapin, the CEO of Winch Design, Koon, the co-founder of Nature Squared, Alastair, a yacht charter and sales broker with Moravia Yachting, and Robert Van Tal, the co-founder and executive director of Water Revolution Foundation. Panelists, thank you very much for joining us today. Aino, can you please start? Give us a bit of an overview of your background, particularly when it comes to sustainability.
Of course, Diane. Hello, and hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I lead the studio called Winch Design. We're based here in London, and we've been designing yachts, super yachts, and aviation projects, architecture projects now for 35 years. And this is a topic that is very dear to our hearts and one that we're really thinking about a lot, and I think we could do even more. So I'm very excited to be on this panel.
Great, thanks, Aino. Koon, please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Koon. Over 20 years ago, I founded Nature Squared. We did so because we wanted to offer sustainable luxury solutions from organic waste materials. Primarily, we find communities we want to support. We get supplies of anything from waste eggshells or shells or feathers or leaves, whatever may be waste, and we turn them into myriad different things. It can be a bathtub made from an eggshell bioceramic through to a feather dashboard for Rolls-Royce. And since our very inception, we've worked with, we've been fortunate enough to work with great designers like Winch in the super yacht space.
Wonderful, thank you. Alastair, I'm sure some of the people here today may recognize the yacht that's in your background. I certainly do. Why don't you tell us a bit about how that pertains to our subject today, and also how, as a broker, it is a very important subject to you.
Hi, thanks, Diane. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Alastair. My background is yacht design. I've been promoting sustainable yacht design for the last 14 years or so, so it's also very close to my heart. As a subject. I'm the only yacht charter and vacations expert that has won international awards in sustainable design, and also from the International Super Yacht Society for excellence in innovation for my design of soliloquy, the Super Green Super Yacht. Over the last 8 years or so, I've been in the brokerage and retail charter sector of the market, and I since launched Moravia Yachting into the Americas region. We're a brokerage company that's been based in Monaco since the 1960s, and we're part of the wider Hill Robinson Group, and it's great to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Alastair. And last but not least, Robert, Again, many of our attendees, I'm sure, are familiar with Water Revolution Foundation, but for the benefit of those who are not, why don't you tell us about what the foundation does and how you are working with the industry?
Thanks, Diane. That would be great if everybody is already aware of our work, but pleasure to be here and also pleasure to introduce our organization. So we're a non-profit organization in the yachting sector and started from within the yachting sector to drive sustainability. And our goal was particularly to provide a collaborative platform across the industry for like-minded companies to work on this big challenge that we have in front of us, and to develop a common approach, a collective approach, and to tackle this in the right way in once. So we bring a scientific approach to the sustainability challenge, but while working with the yachting sector to make it very pragmatic and concrete. So our mission is twofold. At the one hand, it's obviously necessary to reduce significantly the environmental impact. But in order to really be future-proof, we also need to take care of the oceans. So both reducing environmental impact and regenerating the capacity of the ocean to cope with negative impact. That's really our mission of our foundation. That's more and more being understood in the yachting sector, why that is necessary and how that really is driving the sector towards a sustainable future. And we do so with our partners, which vary from management companies to designers to shipyards and a variety of suppliers. And we're growing, and that's a great thing. We're definitely riding the, let's say, the green wave that is going on in, internationally. But as yachting sector, we really need to step up in this field. So I'm very pleased that these kind of conferences are organized, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Great, thank you, Robert. So let's get started. I think, you know, when we think about sustainability these days, when we think about the conversations in our industry that have been going on in terms of sustainability, much of that conversation has been centered around the burning of fossil fuels, reducing emissions, things pertaining to the propulsion systems of the yachts. And as much as that's important, obviously this is a much greater discussion. So I'd like to get a few of our panelists actually to weigh in on this. You know, Aino, why don't you start? What do you see as the role of the designer in terms of sustainability?
Well, I think we all have to focus on the areas that we can really influence. So as an exterior designer or an interior designer or naval architect or shipyard, you're going to have an ability to influence a different scope of the work. For us, it's really being part of those really early discussions, because we might have crucial decisions that are made right at the beginning of the process with the client that are then very difficult to unwind later on in the process. So discussions about the size, the use, there's big discussions at the very beginning, energy efficiency, etc., are really key. And we are trusted advisors, and we believe we're very influential with the clients in a lot of cases, hopefully. But with that comes responsibility. So we really feel like being bold enough to have those discussions at the very beginning is where our responsibility lies. And then we rely on, as Robert was saying, we are creative. So we also rely on information, scientific, verifiable information from our scientific partners, or from the shipyards, from Water Revolution Foundation and elsewhere, to really understand the sustainability credentials of different solutions, so that we can put them forward. And that's where it's essential to be collaborative and curious and just find out more, and not just take for granted what you hear from a supplier.
Great. You know, mentioning the sustainability credentials really struck me because, like Koon, I know that's something that's very dear to you. So why don't you weigh in on this too? What is your view when it comes to the designer's role, and you're taking it from a different standpoint. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you work with some of the companies, some of the suppliers, as well as the design firms?
Okay. Thank you, Diane. Yes, I mean, as I know, you were saying you are very much there at the gateway of the design process. We don't see the owners normally, and it is for you to make those suggestions to the criteria that you have been given. And for us, I see our role as trying to make that job easier, to give you alternatives that, first of all, from a design perspective, from a technical perspective, meet that brief so that you're not having to compromise on those aspects of it. But then I think it's as much as anything about an educational process, so that not just is the design community aware of the alternatives that are out there, and as you said, by making sure that you are deeply aware of the sustainability credentials of each of the options that you are putting on the table. But also, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, not all owners are going to have the same appetite or the same interest in the issue. And I think it's critical to pitch that at the right level, and also perhaps to take them on somewhat of a journey if they're not already there.
Yeah, very good points. Robert, I'd really love for you to come in at this point and talk about the multiple pillars that sustainability involves, because I can say from my standpoint as a journalist and as a human on this earth, I was really quite intrigued when I learned, thanks to you and your team, that sustainability is actually multiple things. So can you please discuss that, and also then talk about the task force that Water Revolution Foundation has with the designers and what that involves in terms of those multiple pillars?
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, I think that's the critical starting point, what the definition of sustainability is. It's obviously an overused word, and sometimes people check out when the word is mentioned. But it's critical to emphasize that sustainability is always about the balance between economic, social and environmental benefits. So when something is completely, let's say, environmental friendly, it might not be economically feasible or socially acceptable. So, and vice versa. So sustainability is always about that balance, that it's really future proof. And nowadays, of course, and especially in our yachting community now, and also through the work that we do, we emphasize a lot the environmental sustainability, because that's where a lot of progress needs to be made. But it's always good to keep in mind that when something is economically not viable, it's still not sustainable. So that's the starting point. Then
tell us about the task force. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. The task force is a great example of a real bottom-up approach. So together with Aino and Winch Design, we created a round table, actually a very informal gathering of yacht designers, virtually, obviously, because nobody was going anywhere. So there was a real good opportunity to get together in a room and just openly discuss, like, hey, what is a role for designers in driving sustainability? What do you recognize in conversations with clients? What is the motivation in your company? How far are you? What are your team members saying? So there was a really open conversation about this, and it led to, why don't we co-create together sort of talking points and more of a structured approach to address this with our clients, and not that they only hear it with us, but hear it in other studios. So we all together make progress in the direction we should go towards. And that actually led in before the summer to the decision to found a task force. And the task force sounds very hands-on, which it is. So because it is about output, we don't want to remain in the roundtable format and only discuss. As you said, we want to walk the walk. So we need to have output, we need to have progress. So in September at the Monaco Yacht Show, we launched the task force consisting of a group of very motivated companies and individuals to drive it forward, to share knowledge. So the let's say the common understanding is that if everybody shares one of their perhaps secretive researches, that you give up one, but you gain in a group of 30, you gain another 29. So you create a knowledge bank, and then you accelerate your own work by sharing that with others. But also we can talk about, so it's a platform again, we can talk about language, we can talk about what is a sustainable concept, and when is somebody able to claim that the concept is really sustainable. So we can also, let's say, co-create and develop those kind of requirements to bring it forward.
Can I jump in just to add something to what Robert was saying, is that it kind of all makes sense now, but at the time where the Water Revolution was trying this out, we really didn't know if this would work at all. And I'd like to point out that that yacht designers have never gotten together and collaborated in this way. And we had really every important name was on that initial call. So it really means that it is top of mind for everyone now to see what we can all do in our own sphere of influence, and that we all felt that we needed help from each other and help from the Water Revolution Foundation, who's supporting our industry essentially, to move this forward. And it's very difficult to do this alone. I mean, we've invested in R&D on materials, which is one of the key areas where we feel we can have an impact. Healthy materials, sustainable materials, and materials that or FF&E that supports craftsmanship, which is something we feel very strongly about. And I can't say this enough, that there are so many crafts that would be lost if it wasn't for the superyacht industry, because no one is the demand is there in our industry, thankfully. But that so we have the means to do some R&D in this space, but it is hard work. It is really hard work to get the information, to find stuff out, and to get that level further in our understanding of what is truly a better solution than what we would usually do.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point that the two of you bring up in terms of this collaborative approach. When I think back to when I first got into yachting in the 1990s, the approach was very silo oriented. You know, builders were each in their own little silo, designers were in their own silo, et cetera. And that's really restrictive when it comes to trying to grow an industry. People act almost like somebody's trying to cheat off their paper when, you know, they're in grammar school. And that's not the way that businesses thrive and survive. The collaborative approach definitely is a way to go. So it's really encouraging to see this sharing of knowledge, and Robert, like you said, the creation of the knowledge bank, because the more people who contribute to it and the more people who can benefit from it, that is only going to benefit these owners who we are currently working with and we will continue to work with for hopefully decades to come. So some really good points. Thanks to you both for that. You know, I know what you were just saying about craftsmanship and trying to keep some of these crafts alive is a perfect segue in what I wanted to actually ask you next, which is the role that the choice of materials plays and in how you go about that process. I know you have some designs that you wanted to show to better explain that. So why don't you go ahead and put those on the screen? Yes. and talk about that.
Okay. So, I mean, while I'm doing that, craftsmanship's really been supported throughout the years, and those are typically some of our little secrets that we hadn't shared with the world, because they are the artists that we go to and who can provide something you wouldn't find somewhere else. But actually, during the pandemic, we decided to put them in the spotlight and to share with the world and give them a platform. So that, because we thought these craftspeople and artists would have a harder time during the pandemic than large design firms. So I think this sort of this was just a small way in which we wanted to help people make it through, because it's essential that they continue to exist and do what they do so well. Here, I thought I would just show, to bring it to life, just show a concept which is the result of our R&D that we did last year. into sustainable materials for an AMLD 60-meter concept called Barefoot. And if I just go back actually one, this was kind of the barefoot lifestyle was the start of this thought process. Sorry, shall I just open this up like this? Can everyone see that? Yes?
Yeah, we can see that, Aino, thanks.
Okay. So we took this opportunity to sort of research different materials, alternatives to traditional leather, and sort of here you have orange fiber, which is a silky material, a sustainable fabric from citrus juice byproducts. So a lot of use of waste material and byproducts. This was made from corn husks. I will not try to pronounce this word. This is made of aloe vera. Linen is biodegradable, and palm leather. You know, these are all examples of materials that we went away and researched. But then to take it, and then we made these beautiful interior concepts with an interactive presentation for our clients to understand what everything was made of. So if I don't know if you can see this master suite here, which is this barefoot, relaxed, beachy interior with everything made of these sustainable materials that we found. So first and foremost, when you tell the story to a client, it has to appeal first because it's beautiful and it's what it appeals to their aesthetic and to their lifestyle. So that's the first point of call. And then I think it's a plus if you can then tell a story about how it was made and what makes it special, because it's looking after the planet and looking after communities. So we had these sort of click buttons to sort of know a little bit more about the story of each of these materials. I just want to skip through to this one, which is the lounge option 1. Here we have a interestingly, this is, I believe, a Nature Squared product. Let me just get this out of the way. So this is 3-dimensional sand material made with, which creates this beautiful surface, which looks like roll stone, but you've not had to carve it out of a mountain. It is made in a different way. And I believe this is actually made with byproducts of fishing and crushed shells, which are essentially calcium. So if we find that we don't have to carve big chunks of mountain out, and we can do this in a smarter way, then we're all for it. These are recycled materials here, or recyclable materials. This is made of pieces of discarded timber. You can still create an incredibly luxurious yacht space here with all of these materials. And again, I can't highlight this enough. You know, we are looking at sourcing, we're looking at manufacturing composition, durability, and all of those advantages. But if it's not beautiful, we're not going to be able just to sell that story to the clients. And then the other important point I wanted to make is that all of this only works if we can have this information verified. And we're actually in the process of having it verified by the scientists at the Water Revolution Foundation to tell us whether the credentials that we have collected from the suppliers, that they're in touch with the suppliers about, actually add up to a sustainability positive impact or not, so that we can then refine our learning, and that we're not just presenting this to a client as a sustainable option, but that it truly is.
Excellent. Like Koon, I know this is a conversation that you and your team have all the time too, the importance of being able to verify that something is truly sustainable and really trying to take things from a natural state and, you know, the natural byproduct even, and reuse it. Why don't you tell us a bit about that too, and how that plays into this?
Mm-hmm. Well, we start really with the source communities that we want to support. So, for example, I know you talked about waste shell. We will start with the individual fishing villages where they are overfishing. We will buy the waste shell that actually has no other purpose. It just sits there in huge piles. It's not just an eyesore, it also smells because, you know, the organic material is rotting. And so by monetizing it, it provides them with, it supplements their incomes, and we take it and then we transform it. And we were talking about craft earlier. To us, it's very, very important that we preserve heritage craft. And indeed, super yachts are one of the few industries that will support that. So whatever our stream of production is, it's very much about starting as close to the source as possible so we can satisfy ourselves that what we're taking is sensible to take. And we will always take expert advice about whether it is or it isn't in the quantities in which we want to take it. So if that's talking to conchologists or rangers or whatever it may be, we do that because first and foremost, before we want to satisfy anybody else, we want to satisfy ourselves. And to share that, you know, I know we'll talk about storytelling, but to share that story, I think is very important because it promotes a transparency at a level where people can identify with it. And that's generally true of all the materials we work with. Now we work with other materials, for example, waste eggshell, where we turn it into a bioceramic, but that we have to get at scale from restaurant chains and bakeries and so on. And so, you know, to the balance of goods, if you like, we know that if we're taking eggs from bakeries and restaurant chains, that these are not going to be organic eggs where, you know, you knew the name of every chicken, okay? They are probably going to come out of industrial farming. But for us, it is the balance of good is that we are diverting this from landfill before it goes in there, before it starts producing methane. And that is what, you know, we need to be doing now as a priority.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Koon. You know, anecdotally, speaking as a journalist, I know that here and there I'm hearing of owners currently asking for more sustainable yachts. I'm wondering if this is just, you know, random owners or if we actually are onto something here. So, Alastair, what is your experience? What is your experience yourself and actually the experience of your fellow brokers at Moravia Yachting? Are owners actually more and more starting to ask for these types of yachts? And related to that, what are they asking for? And you know, what kind of knowledge do they have that they're bringing to the table that's maybe making all of us need to step up more?
Hi, Diane. Great question. Yeah, since 2009, I've been talking with clients about the subject of sustainability in the yachting sector. And it's a broad spectrum of ages. There's no sort of bracket that particularly is asking those questions. You know, those in their 70s or 50s or even more recently, you know, 30s. People are asking these important questions. So I think also it's connected to the average age of charter guests and consequently yacht owners. I think statistically 70% of yacht owners previously chartered. So I think with that age demographic potentially coming down, we're seeing you know, more and more conversations around the subject of sustainability, and I think it's everyone's responsibility within a company, within the industry as a whole, to do our part. As part of the Hill Robinson Group, we're leaders in that sort of sector when it comes to we're the first company to offset our global operations in terms of the carbon footprint. And I think we can all help by doing our part, and it's that collective good. And I think all sizes of yachts are able to be sustainable in different ways. You know, we've seen very large yachts down to the smaller end of the super yacht market, all doing some interesting solutions. Just last year, Lawson announced that in 2025 they're going to be launching a fuel cell technology yacht, and I think it's the leadership in the industry that we're seeing more and more, and it's certainly a conversation that I'm having, that clients are happy to perhaps spend a little bit extra to help innovate and see some innovative design solutions, and ultimately, hopefully, making that a emission-free solution would be the ideal. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too that you say that these owners are spanning multiple age brackets, backgrounds. I think a lot of us would assume that they would fall into one particular demographic, the younger demographic, since that seems to be the popular notion these days. And truly, in many ways, the younger demographic is driving the conversation in terms of all global sustainable initiatives. But it's good to hear that we have multiple generations who are cognizant of that. Great. You know, that makes me wonder now how we can better storytell, Aino and like Koon, as you were beautifully putting it. How do we literally and figuratively sell this notion of sustainability in the coming months and years and for years to come with clients? You know, Aino, since you brought up this term first, why don't you start?
Well, I was thinking first, I was thinking of something that came to mind when because of what Alastair was saying. And I just wanted to add to that there are all the people who have the means of having a yacht who don't own a yacht. I know it's shocking, but there are lots of them out there, and some of the wealthiest people in the world. And so we should be wondering, what do current yacht owners and people who are currently chartering and building yachts, what is their position on sustainability? But then also the chance that we have of bringing in new clients into this industry, and I think a lot of people are working on that. So, so I think they need to come to those companies that are making the most effort, who are most knowledgeable about the industry, about the sustainability, etc. And hopefully, if they do come into the market, then that's who they will ask to work with. Storytelling. Yes, that's something that we believe in is incredibly important because our clients want to tell the stories to their friends. The process of, if I just focus on the custom build market, the process of building the yacht in some cases is as enjoyable as cruising on the yacht itself. They love it. And that's why you have owners who keep coming back for another build, because it is, we try to make it an enjoyable experience, and it is quite unique because it's so bespoke and it's so complex, and they're working with the interior designer, the exterior designer, the naval architects, the broker, the interior contractor, and the list goes on, and all the suppliers. So it's an incredible story for them to share with their loved ones and their friends. And so we need to feed them these great stories about why their yacht is the best and the most beautiful. And in some cases, you just have to be a bit smart about it. You have to understand your client with deep empathy. Some clients will not want to know that it was rotting shell waste in some harbor somewhere. They just care that it's beautiful and they haven't seen it anywhere else and it's unique to them. Others will love that story. So I would just say one size definitely does not fit all in this particular case.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Koon, I know you have some images that you would like to share that help with this storytelling aspect. So why don't you jump in?
Sure. But before I do that, I want to say to Aino, your last point, that's absolutely right. You know, we've been doing what we've been doing for over 20 years, but I will say that for 16, 17, 18 of those years, we never, ever talked about where stuff came from, because just the word waste brings an image to people's minds, right? Of a lack of value, just something that is repulsive. It's not something they can identify with. So, I mean, for me, it is incredible that we can even have this conversation today, because for 15 or 16 years, we just felt that, not that we were a voice in the wilderness, but we had no voice. because there was no interest at all. So I'm 100% behind Aino's statement that one size doesn't fit all, and it is about empathy. It's about figuring out which buttons to press. We're working on a boat right now where I'm pretty sure it's going to be the last boat with a fully teak deck everywhere. The fact is, there's no point sharing stories with that owner. You know, it'll just fall on deaf ears. But where it is receptive, and I'm delighted to see that sort of interactive presentation that Aino shared, because that's something we've been supporting increasingly with designers. And I see our role as providing those materials so that they can be used where they are useful, but only where they are useful. So let me just share this. Can you see my screen? Okay, so for example, this is a very simple story to tell. This is a source community that we work with in the Philippines, where we are based, because it is a poor benighted country with many problems. This is actually an island where I haven't had news for the last month, and I am very worried about what's happening there with the last typhoon. But this lady shucks shells, and the income for the entire family is $3 a day. Okay, so it is poverty on a scale that we're not familiar with on a day-to-day level. But what we do is we source these shells through ZSL, the Zoological Society of London, because that also provides us with a level of assurance that the volumes of shells that they're taking are sustainable and so on in their local environmental terms. In the center here, you see the not very attractive shells, actually, that we are buying. And on the right-hand side, you see faucets made from that shell. This is in collaboration with Dornbracht, and actually is being specified live on a Winch project as it happens. But there you can see, hopefully, a story that's summarized in relatively few images that takes you on a journey. Now, for the people who only look at the right image and say, I like that faucet, it's blue, it goes with my curtains, I'm all for it.
Thanks, Koon. You know, Alastair, from the broker standpoint, what is the position that you see? What are the challenges of this storytelling aspect?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges might be more on the educational side of things. I think through conversation and through, I think it comes down to the responsibility of designers, of advisors, of the brokerage community more generally, to put the topic of conversation on the table. As Aino was saying earlier, is making this conversation at the very front end of the process. And by doing that, you can have, very importantly, a holistic design approach to the yacht and to the build. And so I think overall, it would then minimize any detrimental environmental impact. I think very few yacht owners couldn't see the benefit of that. And so that's an advantage in itself, but also having conversations around operational side of things during the life cycle of the yacht. And then we can also discuss other areas of materials and sustainably sourcing different materials. And ultimately, it's to help protect the reason we all go yachting is to protect the world's oceans and to do our part. And that stems and starts from the design and the manufacture of yachts. And so no one would go yachting if the beautiful oceans weren't there. And so I think it's a very helpful conversation to have with all owners. And then when you throw in the myriad of benefits as well, it's a no-brainer, as they say in America.
You know, related to this aspect of storytelling, of course, there is the issue of selling sustainability as the right thing to do versus a compromise at a higher cost. But people obviously want to do right, but there are, of course, individuals who will push back when they know it will be X amount higher than what they would typically use. That brings up, interestingly enough, or I should say that ties interestingly enough to a question we got from one of our attendees. I'd like to read it out loud. It's from Captain Malcolm Jacatine. Captain Malcolm, I hope I am saying your last name properly. He says, I'm fully on board that a holistic approach is required across the whole ecosystem, but it's clear the most pressing issue is greenhouse gas emissions, both embedded from the build and from the long lifetime of a superyacht. There are many practical solutions available now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but many have a green premium, quote unquote. So what is the panel's opinion of the appetite from owners to pay that premium? Alastair, since you were just talking, why don't you address that?
Yeah, I think, as I was saying a little earlier, that, and great question, by the way, I think a lot of owners are prepared to at least entertain the ideas of different design, propulsion, hull form, all these other important areas that create a more sustainable yacht. And I think even if there is a premium attached at the front end, if you look at the whole life cycle of that yacht, it can have incredible savings when it comes to operationally and other good things. So yeah, I think it's a delicate conversation, but it's an important conversation. And again, it's through education and looking at the leading design solutions and propulsion options that we can all help and do our part with discussions with owners.
May I add to that, Diane?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do, Robert.
Thanks. I think it's absolutely a vital topic, and we should also, let's say, if you develop this together and collectively as an industry and move this direction, you can also expect higher resale values of, let's say, more future-proof yachts. And I think that is something that triggers clients for the longer term. But it's about, let's say, the longer-term approach and more of the rewards that come back from these choices that might have higher premiums. Not always the case, but certainly in the beginning, perhaps that is very likely. You saw that also with electric cars. They were always very expensive, but now you know through the Teslas, etc., they bring down those costs, which not always necessarily mean that they're all environmental friendly technology, but it's a transition that needs to be made. So as long as that transition needs to be made, there's always a price to be paid. But that's exactly the unique opportunity and strategic position that yachting has, because there in shipping, for instance, there are different parameters that make decisions, mostly driven by efficiency and profitability. But in yachting, that's a different approach. So if clients are involved in yachting for a leisure lifestyle, taking it to the sea and enjoying nature, then we should also keep that in a way and make sure that those investments are paying off in that lifestyle. And that is something that we can create together. And I'm not going to overpromise all kinds of things, but there are more and more stricter regulations coming, restricting access to very vulnerable locations. And at some point, you won't be able to access that. If, and this is if, we could work together on such solutions that reduce and minimize or even neutralize impact of yachts in waters, that they could actually have no harm to locations to visit, and bring something to those locations, either attention or really scientific support, that's a completely different picture of yachting. And that is fully optimizing the strategic position we have together with the clients, if those are well willing to take this journey together. We're in a position to do that.
Yeah, well said, well said. We have about 15 minutes before the end of our webinar. We do have a few more questions I wanted to get to, and then we can jump into the Q&A. Let's talk about refits. Refits certainly pose challenges in general. They're very much like the peeling of an onion, right? The more you start to peel, the more you see there are issues. That certainly impacts sustainability. Aino, what is your team doing when it comes to trying to ensure the sustainable life of the products and the materials and the approach in general over the course of a yacht's life?
Well, first of all, I guess we, not necessarily just for sustainability, but we try to design yachts in a timeless way. We don't have a house style, we adapt to the client's dreams. So you will have seen maybe some Winch design projects looking completely different. But in every case, we try to design in a timeless way and in a way that, hoping that the client will keep and look after this yacht for many, many years. And I think everything you can do to extend the life cycle of a project is key. And actually on a positive note, because we're very quick to beat ourselves up in the super yacht industry a lot. But when you think about a yacht compared to a concrete building, there is a life cycle, and then a lot of the materials on board can be recycled in an easier way, like steel, than say concrete. So if you can design it so that it has a long life, and some of our yachts have really stood the test of time, and with the same owner or multiple owners, and then maybe refit that yacht after 15, 20 years, and do that if possible with sustainable materials, and look at the sort of what happens to the materials that you're not using anymore, then I think that is also a fairly sustainable option for an owner. And going back to Captain Malcolm's question, if you're buying a yacht and maybe doing a refit or a refresh, then at least you have reduced the emissions involved with the new build. So we're time and time again, we get a phone call from a captain for a refit, and we always welcome those calls because it's an opportunity to just extend that life cycle.
Something you just mentioned brings up a really good point. When a yacht is being refitted and materials are being taken off that yacht, for instance, an owner doesn't like the woodwork, they want something different, that's stripped off the boat. If it can be reused, great, but how can we make sure that that's an option that they think of? Is that something that needs to be written into the contracts perhaps from the start, or is it something that designers such as you and perhaps refit yards owners, project managers should really begin to discuss more?
Yes, I mean, this is typically the sort of area where it's very useful to get around the table and discuss, because it possibly falls under the responsibility of the client representative or the shipyard, but not really. So if you can all get around a table and say, by the way, what is going to happen to this interior or to this furniture when it leaves the boat, then we can find solutions to it. But it's not top of mind, you're right, and it probably needs to. So I'm not entirely sure, and it's really on a case-by-case basis.
Alastair, what about you? What about your experience and that of the rest of your colleagues at Moravia? Is this something that is already being discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, it's important to have that conversation at the front end before a project begins. And I think it originates from the beginning. So it's trying to approach it from a cradle to cradle approach as opposed to a cradle to grave design approach. And so you're always looking at how are we going to use these materials when you get to the point of a refit? Can you collaborate with other organizations, perhaps outside of the yacht industry, that help to reduce, reuse, or recycle very good materials that can then be repurposed in land or yacht projects? And I think it's also vital to have the conversations with design studios, shipyards, along with the owner and representative, and ensuring a successful refit. We find the best refits are those with professional project management teams overseeing the projects. You get obviously the highest quality, hopefully as well on time and budget. And so to provide that project management is an essential element, I think, to help to ensure that your sustainable credentials are right up there. But also it's an opportunity, I think, as we look at it from the operational side. Once you give a yacht a new life after a refit, perhaps we need to look at not just reducing the overall carbon footprint, but also do we need to be using harmful cleaning products any longer? Can we use alternative cleaning products, or even mitigate the need for them at all if we look towards nanotechnology? And then that way we will not be using all these chemicals in the first place. So loads of great topics and lots more to explore, but those are a few sort of thoughts I had.
Great. And one last question before we bring up our attendees' questions for all of you. And this question I would like all of you actually to weigh in on. How can we future-proof designs? Koon, why don't you start? What's at least one thing that we as an industry can do to really anticipate the challenges that lay ahead? And since future-proofing is all about anticipating, it's not eliminating, as we know. So, really, what's something that's very practical that we can start doing now?
Absolutely. I mean, first, let me agree with that principle. I think we mustn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So I think it's incremental. If you can go through everything that's on, whether it's a material spec or an operating system, and say, here's the best in class, and here's my top 3 alternatives, then you're doing something that's very practical. Doesn't mean that the owner team will go for that particular one, but if you have it as your first port of call, again, never compromising on design or performance, but having that systematized approach, I think that would really help.
Great. Aino, what about you?
I was just reading some of the really interesting questions that have come through. And I was really quite fascinated by what is, are we going to get to those questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, we'll be doing those shortly. We just want to make sure we wrap up with anticipating the challenges ahead, the future-proofing idea, and then we'll jump into that.
Well, it's extraordinarily difficult because if you're looking at a design for a yacht, you don't know if the current owner is going to still be the owner in many years to come. I think the important thing, as I mentioned, to do with the interior, is not to be too swayed by trends, because that makes designs look dated, and you really want to be capturing people's attention with a design which is unique but will stand the test of time. I think we also put some thought into the fact that the needs of the clients evolve as their family grows, for instance. That's just kind of an obvious one. But the need to design spaces that are multifunctional or could be adapted later, because we invariably get asked to add more cabins or change the use of this room into another use. So just trying to keep that in mind when we're designing. But again, we're under such time pressure, and usually with these projects that I can't stress enough how challenging that is. But it's something that we should all think about, and future-proofing, and then really just relying on our partners, because again, we can't do this alone. It's really essential that the designers and the client reps and the brokers and the shipyards all work on this together, because we only hold one small piece of the puzzle, each of us.
Very good. Alastair, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd support everything that's been said so far. I think for me, what could be more luxurious than a super green super yacht? I think that's the epitome of luxury. And so if eco-luxury no longer has to be viewed as an oxymoron, you can have sustainability and luxury in the same sentence. And I think, the innovations that come with it, and the leadership within the industry as a whole, we can see some really exciting things in the future. And again, it comes back to everyone's a stakeholder, whether you're in the designer side, the shipyard, on the sales or advisor side. I think we all need to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and one of which particularly pertinent to the yacht industry is protecting the world's oceans and life below the waterline. And so we can all do our part, and it's that holistic approach that we need to take.
And Robert, your final thoughts?
Well, after what Alastair all said, it's difficult to to add something, especially when someone is native speaker. Well said, Alastair. I think future-proofing yacht design really needs to take into consideration the entire lifetime of the yacht, but also the supply chain. So always think, if I design something, what kind of impact does it have on the shipyard, on a interior builder, in terms of waste, in terms of material sourcing, transportation. And this is not to destroy the beauty of design, especially what Koon said. It can be so nice, and even nicer when the source is let's say correct. And especially never forget, we are in the yachting bubble. And there's a lot of developments going on outside of this bubble. And we need to stay in tune with that in order to be future-proof. And crazier is not always better. And as Alice said, sustainable is probably the new luxury, as it should be. So we can always make sustainable designs, whether a client is asking for it or not. So we have an opportunity, especially in yacht design, where the whole lifetime of the new generation of yachts start. And we don't have many years left until the 2030 agenda is there. So let's start now.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have some excellent questions from our attendees. Here's one that I'll keep the floor open to any of you panelists to address this. So this is coming from someone whose company is an interior outfitting firm. He says, we are completely responsible for the rooms, design, engineering, manufacturing, procurement, installation, the coordination of all trades. For example, we work with a large number of different substrates, adhesives, and coating materials, which we combine with decorative materials. We have to find solutions to realize the demanding designs while also complying with regulations regarding fire load, etc. So how does the panel feel about these so-called invisible areas? What plans are there to bring the IOC's perspective more into the discussion? Does anyone have thoughts on that or any information they can share?
Yeah, we work with IOCs all the time, of course, and we are very, very conscious about the hidden elements. You know, we practice something we call responsible chemistry, which means that any input that we use ourselves, we think about the provenance, but we also think about it in terms of the next step, which is how is it going to be integrated with, you know, the context in which it's going in. And there, I think there's no substitute for communication and two-way education. We learn things from our discussions with the IOCs and vice versa. And so we try and come up with a solution for whatever a particular application is that tries to tick as many boxes as possible. But, you know, great question, because indeed, the devil is in the hidden detail. It's not usually in the pretty things people see.
Well said, Koon. If I may add to that, we encourage and advocate the life cycle assessment approach. So you always look at the entire life cycle, so also the procurement and the build process, etc., and even end of life. So this is perhaps hidden when you only look at operations, but it's not hidden if you take the full life cycle approach. That's why we always advocate that, and also our assessment tools are exactly based on LCA.
And if I can add something, I would say that this is a really important question that was raised. And as an interior contractor, if you can find solutions that are better than the substrates that are, you know, currently used, and do some research into that, and then have this story to go to the client representatives and the brokers and the shipyards to tell your angle, it could be a really good differentiator in the next sort of tender, for everyone for you to stand out, basically, in the next bidding competition.
Okay, we have another very good question. It has been said, sorry, this is being addressed to you, Aino. It's been said by others that refits are the elephant in the room, and sustainable sourcing does not necessarily equate to sustainable afterlife. Might you agree that to attract new entrants to yachting, that a very different type of yacht experience is required? Figure the Shenandoah of Sark, built in 1902, could be more of this type to meet the needs of new owners and provide sustainable yachting. If not that, then what?
Thanks for addressing this question to me. I guess a few things come to mind. It's a very difficult question to answer, but I would say that I have heard in the past that sometimes, instead of looking for crazy R&D innovation, some of the solutions are in past naval design. So whether it's hull form or the use of wind power to power vessels, of course, it's all existed for quite some time. So we should take inspiration from the past, of course. Maybe that's part of that question. I'm not sure that the sailing experience is necessarily right for all clients. Some of our clients are sailors. Some of them own a sailing yacht and a motor yacht, and they use them in different ways. And other clients are absolutely not sailors, and they won't be comfortable with that experience. They need more space, less movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to maybe take inspiration, use what we can. People are talking about sail-assisted motor yachts, and maybe that is part of the solution, but also adapt to the dreams of the clients and the lifestyle that they want to have, how many cabins they need, how many guests they're going to have on board, what kind of space they need, and whether the solutions, the concepts that we're bringing forward appeal to their lifestyle.
Okay, another question. How are the panel see a carbon tax impacting the industry? The Marshall Islands, for instance, has proposed a tax in reference to CO2 emissions to the IMO for implementation no later than 2025. The EU already has a carbon tax on shipping in 2023 for vessels exceeding 5,000 gross tons. Could this help shift us to more efficient yachts?
Yeah, that's the question. So I think there's a rationale to that. I would love to know what Marshall Islands are going to do with those funds, if they are going to fund then also R&D and innovation for maritime sector. That would be great, that the funds go back into the sector. Obviously, punishing is always a way to push forward, but it's not a very constructive way. So I hope we can all together drive innovation before it comes to taxation. But if it is necessary to push the late adopter, so to say, in the right direction, this is a mechanism. But I think if that will come, it's even more motivation to stay ahead of that and to show how innovative you really can be, and that this is not necessarily necessary to drive forward.
I think if I may jump in, I think it would be wonderful to see more owners voluntarily offset carbon. Alastair mentioned that Hill Robinson are offsetting their carbon. So, and one could imagine that owners could decide to do that, and what benefit that would have on the image of the superyacht industry in general. And I know that this year in Glasgow, there was a lot of talk about blue carbon offsetting, as in investing in, instead of planting trees, protecting the ocean, planting kelp, which apparently absorbs so much more carbon. So if we protect the ocean might actually save us, as in save the planet, not just save the ocean, but save the planet from the dangers of climate change. And so I think this brings a whole new dimension. And I believe the Blue Marine Foundation have been lobbying this a lot, a whole new dimension to protecting the oceans, which is now a wider debate around its effect on climate change.
Yeah, I'd agree. And to endorse what you were just saying, Aino, that you can purchase these carbon credits, and through all my yacht charters and for owners of yachts as well, you can offset your carbon footprint. So for any yachts that have previously been built, or perhaps going through that refit and that conversation we're having earlier, you can ensure that the whole use of your yacht has net zero impact in terms of the carbon footprint that you have. You purchase carbon credits, and then the Yacht Carbon Offset organization then have been supporting the first blue carbon project, and they're planting mangroves in Kenya. And not only are you absorbing CO2 through that, but you're also providing sustainable employment, sustainable education for the local community. And so you're doing so many good benefits, and in the knowledge that your yachting and the lifestyle of yachting, perhaps getting to and from your yacht, can also be offset. And so, yes, I fully endorse what was said. And I think as an interim, we should all be looking at offsetting our yacht charters and our yacht ownership.
I think that sorry, excuse me, Rob. No, offsetting, is a contentious area, because, as you said, Alastair, it's very much which offsets are you buying, and how is that really being applied? We'll speak as somebody who's been burnt in this area. We were very much keen on the mangrove planting, and then several years later found that actually it was the wrong type of mangrove plant in the wrong place. Which has made us very wary of anything that we cannot see with our own eyes and validate, for our own comfort. That said, I think it's clear that is the way to go. What I ask myself, of course, agreeing with everything that's been said before about the relative negative approach of taxation, is why can the industry not, instead of just offsetting for net zero, why can't they offset beyond to a positive? Because if you want to make a statement that you're not just, deflecting criticism, then you have to have a net good, not a net zero.
Yeah. I can't agree more, Koon. And also, as you said about the mechanism that is questionable, it also doesn't necessarily incentivize or drive real improvements. It compensates a current behavior. And of course, it's not always possible to directly change. And then it's still better to compensate and offset than doing nothing. I won't argue that. But we first need to look at mitigating, reducing impacts, and perhaps investing to make it really less and reduce on that before compensating. It shouldn't be too easy to just continue things as usual because you have an opportunity to just offset for a couple of $100.
We see offset